It's me, Professor Brian, the professional that is not qualified in any way, shape, or form. Now, I've been slacking with my educational videos as of late. In fact, I've been slacking with all of my videos as of late. But recently, my good buddy Ivan showed me a picture of his teacher showing one of my economics videos to his class. And my mind was just blown. At that point, I just thought to myself, I have found my true calling. And that is why I am back today to make another economics video. So if you're sitting for your IGs in May and June, it means that you have a very, very short time to prepare for your exams. So there's not much point going over the overall syllabus again, because by now you should probably have a decent understanding of what's in the syllabus. So what I am going to be teaching you about today is exam tips and tricks. This is basically exam hacks. Because the thing about exams is that even though a lot of people say, oh, if you just write and you get the basic thing down and you have the flow with your writing, you'll get the marks for Econs. Yeah, that's true to an extent, but you can still follow specific rules and steps to make sure you're getting all the marks you possibly can. If that sounds interesting, let's hop in. Okay, so for this video, I'm going to be covering the more difficult structural paper 2, which has to do with a lot of writing. So, on paper 2, there are 4 main types of questions. There are define questions, explain questions, analyze questions, and discuss questions. And today we're going to tackle all 4, and I'm going to teach you the best ways to answer them, at least in my opinion. Okay, so the first basic type of question are the definition questions. Now these are pretty self-explanatory. They basically say, what is meant by fixed cost, or what is meant by inflation, or define this, define that. And that is simple. You just take your own knowledge of what the definition is and you write it down. So the problem with define questions is that people will know what the terminology is, but they won't know how to expand it to get the 2 marks. So let's take the example of what is meant by fixed cost. Now, most people, like a bunch of people, will just write costs that do not change. And that is absolutely correct. That is right. 1 mark. But the question is out of 2 marks. So you need to bring something else into the question. So the full answer would be a cost that does not change and is not affected by levels of output within a firm. Or you can just say a cost that does not change based on output. And that will get you 2 marks because you're bringing 2 aspects of what fixed costs are. So during define questions, when you're tackling define questions, you need to make sure that you're bringing at least 2 traits or 2 characteristics of the term that you're trying to define in order to get the full 2 marks. So the next main type of questions are the explain/describe type questions. Now these questions are very similar, so I'm going to be tackling them both in this segment. So let's get straight into it. So basically, explain questions are just quick applications of your knowledge as an econ student. So an example question would be, explain why the social costs are greater than the private costs of owning a car. So in order to answer that question, we need to think, what are social costs, what are private costs, and why do these social costs outweigh the private costs in the context of owning a car? So, what are private costs? Private costs are the costs to an individual. So the private cost of owning a car would be the price of the car, the price of maintenance for the car, the price of petrol for the car, things like that. And the social costs are made up of private costs and external costs. Now, external costs are costs that are incurred on people that had nothing to do with owning the car. So obviously, if I drive my car, I release carbon monoxide to the entire world. And people standing around my car as I'm driving it will inhale that carbon monoxide, and that is bad for their health. That, therefore, is an external cost, or a negative externality that I am placing on someone else. So, a social cost consists of the external costs and the private costs, when private costs are just private costs. Therefore, social costs have to be greater than the private cost. So how do you put that into an answer? Alright, so first of all, you state, what are the private costs? The private costs of owning a car consist of the price of said car, Just say that. That's a simple statement. And then you can say, but owning a car can incur externalities on other people. Externalities such as pollution, congestion, and accidents. And then you say social costs are external costs combined with private costs. Therefore, the social costs must be greater than the private costs. And boom, that is your 4 marks. The main thing to remember about this format of explain questions is that you are trying to prove why a specific economic statement is correct. So the statement given to you for this question was that social costs of owning a car are greater than the private costs of owning a car. So you need to break that down and think of reasons as to why is this correct? Why is this so? How does this happen? So if you can break it down and explain why these things are, then you will automatically be able to get the marks. The next type of explain question is the explain advantages/disadvantages. Now these are quite simple because they're just picking out, finding, and explaining advantages that happen because of what the question gives you. So the example I have for you today is give 2 economic advantages of a fall in unemployment. So out of 4 marks, 2 are for identifying said advantages. So you get 2 marks if you just say, okay, fall in unemployment, less poverty, higher production in the economy. That's already 2 marks. If you want to get all 4 marks, you need to explain why each of those things is an advantage. So starting with higher production. When there is higher production in the economy, it means that they can export more goods. It means that they can sell more goods. It means that there's economic growth, and that will help the economy. And if you want to get super fancy with it, you can link it to a production possibility curve and be like, when there is more production, when there's higher rates of people working, it can shift the production possibility curve to the right. There will be an outward expansion of the production possibility curve. Perfect. Then you'll get the 2 marks for that. Next, fewer people in poverty. Okay, why is that good? Well, when there are fewer people in poverty, it means more people are working. It means the government can collect more tax revenue. It means the government will be less liable for helping the people that are in poverty. It means the government has to spend less tax dollars on welfare benefits. So those are tangible benefits brought about by having less poverty. So you just explain, you just identify the advantage or disadvantage, and you explain why it's an advantage or disadvantage. And rinse and repeat based on how many marks the question is worth. Now, I'm just going to touch a little bit about the describe questions, because describe questions aren't very unique on their own. Now, describe questions can either be extended definitions or basically the same thing as explanations. So they can be like, describe what is meant by a country's inflation rate. So you basically add one more thing onto state what is meant by inflation, which is a sustained rise in the general price level in goods of the country. That is the 2-mark answer. The 3-mark answer would be something like the percentage of the sustained rise in the general price level of goods within the economy over a period of time. You just add a little bit more, you've got it. And the second type of describe questions are basically just explain questions. So no need to cover that in too much detail. The third main type of question that you'll find on a paper 2 exam is the analyze type of question. Now, analyze questions are pretty much explain questions plus. So you state the thing and you explain why the thing affects the other thing, and also why the other thing is important for the main thing that you're trying to analyze. Now, that sounds confusing, but once we replace the things with actual things from economics, it'll make the thing less complicated. You understand? Okay. So the main thing that separates analyze questions and explain questions is context, meaning that you will have a specific situation that you need to apply your economics knowledge to. Okay, so let's break this question down. So you can see that the main topic of this question is the price elasticity of demand. And be sure not to mix up price elasticity of demand with price elasticity of supply, because if you write about the wrong thing, you're going to cost yourself the entire 5 marks. So, the price elasticity of demand. You want to start out with what price elasticity of demand is, and that's simple. Price elasticity of demand is the sensitivity of the demand for a good or service. And that is simple. Price elasticity of demand is the sensitivity of the demand for a good or service to the change in price of that good or service. Meaning that, okay, for the sake of today's video, I have purposely decided to pick a question that seems a lot more complex than it actually is, just to show you how simple it can actually get when you break it down. So the question I have chosen is, analyze how an airline can use the concept of price elasticity of demand to decide whether or not to lower its prices. Now that seems like a mouthful, and when you're thinking about it, and when you're reading it, you're gonna think, oh my god, what is this? But don't worry, I'm gonna break it down to you, and you're gonna understand that it's actually quite simple to answer these questions. Okay, so we can see here that the main draw of this question is the price elasticity of demand. So we're going to talk about the price elasticity of demand, not the price elasticity of supply. Do not ever get those mixed up. So, what is the PED? The price elasticity of demand is the sensitivity of the demand of a good or service to changes in price of that good or service. So that's the definition. That'll net you a mark. So in the context of this, how does PED affect pricing? So when something is priced inelastic, it means that people will still purchase the thing even if the prices are high, meaning that demand is not very reactive to changes in price. However, when something is priced elastic, it means that demand is very sensitive to changes in price, meaning that, let's say, if the price of the new iPhone went to about $20,000, you probably wouldn't buy it because it's price elastic. So, however, if the price of water went up to like 5 ringgit a bottle, you would have no choice but to buy it because you need that stuff to live. So the main context here is that the airline is considering lowering its prices. So you need to apply that to your knowledge. So if airline tickets are price elastic, it means that a lowering of the prices will likely raise revenue as more people want to buy those airline tickets, and that counterbalances, right, the loss in revenue from cheaper flight tickets. But if airline tickets are priced inelastic, a lowering of prices will cause the airline to lose money because the change in people buying those airline tickets will not counterbalance the loss in revenue caused by cheaper flight tickets. So that gets you 3 marks. Where do the other 2 come from? Well, it says in the mark scheme, up to 2 marks for additional development, recognizing that the situation is more complex. For example, different flights have different price elasticity of demand, and effect on profit will also depend on costs. So here it's basically telling you that once you have the main points about price elasticity out of the way, you can go on and expand your point and develop that point even further so that you just get those extra marks in. And so for analyzed questions, you just want to go take your answer a step further. You want to take your answer a step further and add a little bit more information, add a little bit of specific context. Because the example here is that different flights will have different price elasticity of demand. And price elasticity of demand can be very subjective. So if you can show the examiner that you have that contextual knowledge that you can apply, that will net you the marks. Okay, moving on to the 4th, final, and most long-winded type of question that you can get on an Econs paper 2 is the discuss questions. Now, discuss questions can range from 6 to 10 marks, and they all follow the same basic principle. A few points for, a few points against. Now, something that I hear a lot of Econs teachers saying is that you need an introduction and you need a conclusion. No, you don't. You don't need that. Nowhere in the mark scheme does it ever say you need an introduction or a conclusion. And in an exam, you don't want to be wasting precious minutes doing something that won't get you any marks. So don't do the introduction, don't do the conclusion. Jump straight into getting marks. So here I'm going to give you an example of a 10-mark question. Discuss whether a country would benefit from the lowering of the school leaving age. So, we just need to break this down and answer the question. Okay, so we're going to start with one point. And that point is, when the age of school leaving is reduced, that means more people are going to drop out of school, and that means more people are going to start working. So therefore, the labor force is increased, or the amount of people in the labor force is increased. So what does that affect? That affects production. More people in the labor force, or a larger labor force, right, means that there is higher rates of production, meaning that there is more output. And if you want to extrapolate that, you can be like, this could lead to an outward shift on the production possibility curve. And what does this mean? It leads to more economic growth. As there is more production, there is more exports, there are more goods to sell. And what does economic growth do? That could lead to higher standards of living for everyone, as there is more economic growth and there is more money coming into the country, and therefore there is more spending and there is more tax revenue for the government. So the government can then have more tax revenue, and that means that they can do things like develop infrastructure, spend on supply side policies, and just generally improve the country and help develop the country. So those are 5 points. Now, they may only be 3 points depending on who's marking me, but that is definitely something. That is a lot of expanding and extrapolating from the first point, because I was just able to take that 1 point, link it to other different points. Now, looking at the mark scheme, right, 3 of the things that I said, I forgot what I just said though. 3 of the things that I just said were not even on the mark scheme. And the thing about Econs is that even if your answer is not specifically on the mark scheme, examiners are given free rein to mark if they believe that the answer to the question is relevant, or if they believe your answer is relevant and applies to the question correctly. Because this is, well, Econs. There are no specific right or wrong answers. So that was just a series of links. And you just want to have 1 or 2 of those series of links so that you get up to 5 or 6 marks. Now, once you have those 6 marks, you can move on to the disadvantages, or points against what your first paragraph was about. So obviously, we're going to go against what I was just talking about just now. Why lowering the school leaving age will actually hurt an economy. Okay, so starting from one single point. When a lot of unexperienced, unqualified workers or less skilled workers start working in the industry of a country, that may lower the quality of the workforce. Now, this in the long run may actually lower the production and the output of the country. Why? Because when the workers are less skilled, they aren't as productive. Their productivity is lower than if they were actually skilled. What does this mean? That they actually start earning less money, or they will earn less money because they aren't as skilled and they aren't as valuable to firms. And what happens is that because their productivity is also much lower, all right, firms may also lose out on money. Firms may not earn as much money as they would have if the majority of the labor force was more skilled. So this could lead to lower amounts of government tax revenue because the firms are earning less money, therefore they can pay less corporate tax, and the workers are earning less money, so they can pay less income tax. So that is one series of links. A second series of links would be that this reduces the quality of the products that the country produces. So this would reduce the international competitiveness of that country because foreign markets would be less likely to import goods from that country or import goods made from that country. So they might gain a reputation for poor quality goods. Now this would disincentivize MNCs and transnational corporations from setting up and selling or producing in that country, and that may lead to a loss in revenue for that country. So that's like another set of links. I don't remember, I don't know how many points I got there, but that's another set of links. Now you just want to have multiple sets of links for this answer, and overall you just want to have a decently sized chunks for and a decently sized chunk against, and you just want to make sure you have enough points and explanation to get the full marks. Really, the best advice that I can give you right now is learn how to link. And linking can be super easy because of how everything is just so connected in econs. Like, find something that you really are interested in. Find like a specific, part of economics that you're super interested in. Let's say you really understand supply and demand. Find a way to link everything back to supply and demand. And because you understand the concept of supply and demand, your answer immediately becomes higher quality because you understand supply and demand. And by linking it back to supply and demand, you're basically shifting the question to fit your skills. Let's say you're really good at...
A few moments later.
Let's say you're really good at monetary policy, or
one eternity later.
Or let's say you have a detailed knowledge of inflation and deflation. Well, you can find ways to link almost every question back to things like inflation and deflation. And because you're really, really knowledgeable in inflation and deflation, you shift the question to fit what you're good at. And you can do that with econs because of how interconnected everything is. So linking and just bringing and taking different points and crossing them over, that is something that's super important that you should really learn how to do. And that is going to make sure you get all the top marks because you're able to basically change the question to fit you. Because as long as you link whatever you write back to the main topic of the question, the examiner has no choice but to be like, you know what, he answered that question. Yep, that's right. This will happen if this happens. Yep, that does relate to the question. I have to give him the mark. That's the only way it can go, if you do it right though. Okay guys, that brings us to the end of today's video. I'm really glad you guys watched, and I really hope this video was able to help you. I wish you all the best for your IGCSEs. Now, if you have any extra questions, feel free to comment them below or to DM me on Instagram at LaserTheKiller. Also, I would really appreciate it if you shot me a follow. So if you have any questions, feel free to contact me in any way. I will try to help you. I'll try to break it down to you. But of course, you should ask your own teacher as well, because that's what they're paid to do. But either way, I am happy to help anyone who comes to me for advice. So I wish you all the best. Good luck. See ya.